At 70 years old, Harold Mitchell was invisible. The students at Riverside High School walked past him every single day without a second glance. They saw the mop in his hands, the faded blue uniform, the weathered face of a man who cleaned up after them. But what they didn't see, what none of them could have possibly imagined, was that the old janitor pushing that cart down the hallway had once stood on stages that held thousands. And the song he hummed while mopping their floors? It was about to change everything. Harold's alarm went off at 4:30 every morning, just like it had for the past 12 years. His small apartment in South Brooklyn wasn't much. A single room with a hot plate, a narrow bed, and walls so thin he could hear his neighbor's television through the night. But it was his. And at 70, after everything he'd lost, having something that was truly his meant more than most people would ever understand. He pulled on his uniform slowly, his joints protesting the early hour. The arthritis in his hands had gotten worse this year, but he couldn't afford to miss work. Not when the rent was due, not when his medication costs kept climbing, not when he was just 5 years away from being able to finally collect his full pension. The bus ride to Riverside High took 40 minutes. Harold always sat in the same seat, third row from the back, right side. He'd watch the city wake up through the scratched window, and sometimes, just sometimes, he'd close his eyes and remember a different version of himself. A younger man with a guitar and a dream. A man who believed that talent and hard work were all you needed to make it in this world. He'd learned the hard way that sometimes the world has other plans. By 5:45, Harold was pushing his yellow cleaning cart through the empty hallways of Riverside High. This was his favorite time of day. Before the chaos, before the noise, before the students arrived and reminded him just how invisible he'd become. In these quiet hours, he could sing. Nothing too loud, just under his breath. Old songs mostly. Songs from the 70s and 80s, back when he was still performing in small clubs around Manhattan, back when people told him he had something special. But then life happened. His wife, Sarah, got sick. Stage for lymphoma. The medical bills came like a tsunami, drowning him in debt. He sold his guitars, his equipment, everything that connected him to music. He took the first job he could find that offered health insurance. And when Sarah passed away 3 years into his job at the school, he stayed because leaving felt like abandoning the last thing he'd sacrificed everything for. That morning, as Harold mopped the main hallway, he didn't notice the phone press against the trophy case. Didn't see the small red recording light blinking in the shadows. 17-year-old Tyler Bennett had set up as a joke, planning to catch the weird old janitor doing something embarrassing. Tyler was the kind of kid who thought cruelty was comedy, who measured his worth by how many likes he could get on social media. What Tyler's phone captured instead would haunt him for months to come. Harold was singing that morning, really singing, not just humming, but letting his voice carry through the empty corridor. The song was one he'd written 40 years ago, never recorded, never shared with anyone but Sarah. It was about second chances and holding on when everything tells you to let go. His voice, whether by age and grief, still carried that raw emotional power that had once made club owners in Greenwich Village tell him he was going to be somebody. By 7:30, students started flooding the hallways. Harold pushed his cart toward the cafeteria, invisible once again. He passed groups of teenagers who were too absorbed in their phones to notice him. Past teachers rushing to their classrooms with coffee cups and lesson plans. Past a vice principal who'd worked there for 8 years and still didn't know his name. In third period, Tyler Bennett sat in the back of his English class, grinning at his phone. He'd already edited the video, adding mocking text overlays. This is what our school pays for, and janitor thinks he's on American Idol, and someone tell Grandpa the audition's over. He posted it to TikTok with the caption, "Old man at my school really thought he was doing something. I'm dead." The video started getting views immediately. 10, then 50, then 200. Tyler showed his friends, and they laughed, and they shared it, and the numbers climbed. 1,000 views. 5,000. By lunch period, it had 20,000 views, and Tyler was riding high on his moment of viral fame. But something strange was happening in the comments. Instead of joining in the mockery, people were asking questions. Who is this man? That voice is incredible. This isn't funny. This is actually beautiful. Does anyone know what song this is? A music teacher from California commented, "This man has genuine talent. The tone, the emotion, this is the real thing." Tyler's smile started to fade as the comment section filled with people defending Harold, criticizing Tyler for his cruelty, demanding to know who the singer was. The video hit 100,000 views, then 500,000. But instead of being celebrated, Tyler was being torn apart. People were calling him heartless, cruel, a bully. His joke had backfired spectacularly. By the end of the school day, the video had 2 million views. And it wasn't stopping. Harold knew nothing about any of it. He finished his shift at 3 o'clock, rode the bus home, heated up a can of soup for dinner, and fell asleep watching the evening news. It had been a day like any other day in his 12 years at Riverside High. Unremarkable, invisible, but while Harold slept, the internet was trying to find him. The video had been picked up by several large accounts, and the tide had completely turned. Tyler's mocking captions had been screenshot and shared as examples of cyberbullying. Meanwhile, Harold's voice was being praised by musicians, vocal coaches, and music producers. Someone found an old article from 1983 about a promising singer-songwriter named Harold Mitchell who performed at the Bitter End in New York City. The pieces started coming together. A music producer named Rebecca Chun in Los Angeles couldn't stop replaying the video. She'd been in the industry for 25 years, had worked with Grammy winners and platinum-selling artists, and she recognized something rare. When she heard it, that voice had lived. It carried the weight of real experience, real pain, real hope. In an industry drowning in auto-tune and manufactured emotion, Harold's raw, authentic sound was like finding water in a desert. Rebecca spent the entire night trying to track him down. She called Riverside High School, but the office was closed. She posted on social media, asking if anyone knew the janitor in the video. She watched the video over and over, that song Harold had been singing burrowing into her mind. By morning, the video had 15 million views. National news outlets were picking up the story. Viral video captures janitor's incredible voice, read one headline. Teen's cruel prank backfires, launches unexpected singing sensation, read another. Harold's alarm went off at 4:30. Just like always, he had no idea that his life was about to implode in the most unexpected way possible. When he arrived at Riverside High that morning, something was different. The school parking lot had news vans. Harold frowned, wondering if there had been some kind of incident. He made his way to the staff entrance, fumbling for his ID badge. Principal Margaret Walsh was waiting inside. She was a stern woman in her 50s, someone Harold had maybe spoken to 3 times in 12 years. But this morning, her eyes were soft, almost emotional. "Harold," she said gently, "we need to talk. Come to my office, please." Harold's first thought was that he was being fired. His heart sank. Had he done something wrong? Missed a spot? Broken some new rule he hadn't been told about? In the principal's office, Margaret turned her computer screen toward him. "Harold, do you know anything about this?" On the screen was Tyler's video. 20 million views now. Harold stared at it, not understanding. That was him. That was his voice. That was the hallway he cleaned every morning. I don't understand," Harold said softly. Margaret's voice was gentle. "One of our students recorded you singing yesterday morning and posted it online. It's gone viral. Harold, 20 million people have watched this. The news is outside. There are music producers trying to reach you. Harold, the whole world is trying to find you." Harold's hands started trembling. He felt dizzy, disconnected from reality. This couldn't be real. Things like this didn't happen to 70-year-old janitors. Things like this didn't happen to people like him. "There's someone on the phone who's been calling all morning," Margaret continued. "A music producer from Los Angeles. She says she wants to talk to you about recording that song. Harold, she's legitimate. I checked. She's worked with some of the biggest names in the industry." Harold couldn't speak. 40 years ago, this was all he'd wanted. A chance, an opportunity, someone to believe in his music. But he'd given up that dream, buried it alongside Sarah, convince himself that some ship sail and never return to port. The meeting with Rebecca Chun happened over FaceTime right there in the principal's office. Rebecca had tears in her eyes as she spoke to Harold, explaining how his voice had moved her, how authentic and powerful it was, how rare it was to find something real in the music industry. "I want to record your song, Harold," Rebecca said. "The one you were singing in that video. And I want to hear everything else you've written. I think you have something special, and I think the world needs to hear it. It's never too late, Harold. It's never too late." Harold broke down. 70 years of carrying grief and disappointment and sacrifice came pouring out in that moment. Margaret quietly left the room to give him privacy, and Harold cried like he hadn't cried since Sarah's funeral. But these weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of disbelief, of hope, of a future he thought had been lost forever suddenly spreading out before him like sunrise. The next 2 weeks were a blur. Rebecca flew Harold to Los Angeles, put him up in a hotel, and brought him into a professional recording studio. Harold walked in holding the notebook he kept hidden under his bed for decades. Pages and pages of songs he'd written over the years, songs born from love and loss and longing. The session musicians stopped what they were doing when Harold started to sing. His voice filled the studio, and you could feel it, that intangible something that separates someone who can sing from someone who can move souls. They recorded 5 songs in 3 days. The title track, "Hold On," was the song from a viral video. The others told the story of Harold's life, his love for Sarah, his sacrifice, his survival. Rebecca rushed the single's release. "Hold On" hit streaming platforms 2 weeks after the original video went viral, and the response was overwhelming. It debuted at number 14 on the Billboard Hot 100, making Harold Mitchell the oldest artist in history to chart with a debut single. The music video, which featured Harold at Riverside High juxtaposed with old photos of him as a young musician and with Sarah, had 30 million views in its first week. But something else happened that mattered even more than the charts or the views. Tyler Bennett had been drowning in guilt. The backlash against him had been severe. He'd been suspended from school, lost friends, faced endless criticism online. But the worst part was seeing Harold's story unfold and realizing the pain his casual cruelty could have caused. Seeing the man he'd mocked reveal a life of sacrifice and loss made Tyler confront his own capacity for thoughtless harm. The day Harold returned to Riverside High for a surprise assembly, the school wanted to honor him before he left for his music tour. Tyler waited in the hallway. His hands shook as he approached Harold. "Mr. Mitchell," Tyler said, his voice cracking, "I'm the one who posted the video. I'm the one who tried to make fun of you. And I'm so sorry. I was cruel and thoughtless, and I didn't see you as a real person. I just wanted likes and attention, and I hurt you to get them. I know sorry is enough, but I needed to say it to your face." Harold looked at the 17-year-old kid, this child really, who was learning one of life's hardest lessons about consequences and empathy. Harold thought about being 17 himself, thought about the mistakes he'd made, the people he'd hurt with careless words before life taught him better. Harold put his hand on Tyler's shoulder. "You gave me my life back, son. You didn't mean to, but you did. You reminded the world I exist. So I forgive you. But more importantly, you need to forgive yourself and do better. That's all any of us can do. See our mistakes, own them, and do better tomorrow." Tyler broke down crying right there in the hallway. And Harold, the man who'd been invisible for so long, did something remarkable. He hugged the boy who tried to humiliate him, and in doing so, taught everyone watching what grace really looks like. The school assembly was standing room only. Students, teachers, parents, and press packed into the gymnasium. Harold stood at a microphone on stage, his first time performing for a live audience in 4 decades. He told his story. He talked about Sarah, about sacrifice, about believing that your worth isn't determined by your job title or your bank account. He talked about staying invisible for so long that he'd almost convinced himself he didn't matter anymore. "But here's what I learned," Harold said, his voice strong and clear. "We're all one moment away from everything changing. We're all one person away from being seen. And sometimes the things we think are ending us are actually saving us. I thought my music died when Sarah got sick. I thought I buried it with her, but it was just waiting for the right moment, the right person, the right circumstances to remind me that dreams don't have expiration dates. Harold picked up a guitar, a beautiful vintage Gibson that Rebecca had given him, and he sang Hold On live for the first time since that morning in the empty hallway. But now he wasn't invisible. Now, 1,000 people were watching, listening, feeling every word. When he finished, the gymnasium erupted. Students who'd walked past him for years were crying. Teachers were on their feet. Tyler Bennett stood in the back, applauding until his hands hurt, tears streaming down his face. 3 months later, Harold Mitchell released his full album, Never Too Late. It went platinum. He appeared on late-night talk shows, morning shows, NPR's Tiny Desk. At 70 years old, he was living the dream he'd abandoned 4 decades earlier. He donated a portion of his proceeds to cancer research in Sarah's name. He started a scholarship fund at Riverside High for students pursuing arts education. But the most important thing Harold did was this. He kept showing up, not as a janitor anymore. The school had replaced him. Though they'd offered him a permanent artist in residence position, he politely declined. No. Harold showed up at small venues, at community centers, at nursing homes and hospitals. He sang for people who felt invisible, who felt forgotten, who'd given up on their dreams. And everywhere he went, Harold told his story. He told them about Tyler's video, about the cruelty that accidentally became kindness, about the second chance that arrived just when he'd stopped believing in second chances. A year after the video went viral, Harold returned to Riverside High one more time. The school had commissioned a mural in the main hallway, right where he used to push his yellow cart. It showed Harold at 70, microphone in hand, with the words Hold On painted in sweeping letters around him. When the world stops seeing you, keep seeing yourself. When the dream seems dead, keep it breathing. When you're ready to quit, hold on just one more day. Tyler Bennett, now 18 and about to graduate, stood next to Harold at the mural's unveiling. He'd changed in that year, grown softer, more thoughtful, more aware of his impact on others. He'd even started volunteering at a senior center, spending time with elderly people, listening to their stories, making sure they felt seen. You know what's funny? Harold said to Tyler, as they stood together, looking at the mural, I spent 12 years trying to be invisible. I thought it was safer that way. Hurt less. But being invisible doesn't protect you from pain. It just protects you from life, from connection, from possibility. Tyler nodded. I spent my whole life trying to be visible, to be seen, to matter, to trend, but I was going about it all wrong. Real visibility isn't about how many people are looking at you. It's about really seeing other people and letting them see the real you. Harold smiled. Took us both a while to figure that out. That evening, Harold performed at Carnegie Hall, the venue every musician dreams of playing. The sold-out crowd included music legends, celebrities, and regular people who connected with his story. But in the front row sat a group of students from Riverside High. Tyler among them, guest of honor at Harold's invitation. As Harold walked onto that legendary stage, guitar in hand, he thought about the journey that brought him there, the small clubs of his youth, the hospital room where he'd held Sarah's hand, the early mornings mopping hallways, the yellow cleaning cart, the song hummed in an empty corridor, the video that changed everything. He thought about how easily this could have never happened. If Tyler had slept through his alarm that morning, if Harold had stayed quiet, if the internet had reacted differently, if Rebecca hadn't been listening. The butterfly effect of it all was staggering. Harold adjusted the microphone and looked out at the audience. I'm 71 years old, he said, his voice filling Carnegie Hall. And this is my debut. Some of you might think that means I wasted 50 years. But I don't see it that way. Those 50 years taught me what it means to survive, to sacrifice, to love, to lose, to keep going when keeping going seems impossible. And every single one of those experiences is in these songs. You can't sing with this much truth in your voice without having lived it first. He paused, emotion catching in his throat. So everyone out there who thinks it's too late, who thinks their moment passed, who thinks they're too old, too tired, too far behind, I'm here to tell you that your story isn't over until you stop writing it. Dreams don't expire. Talent doesn't have an age limit. And sometimes the thing you think destroyed your dream was actually just a long road to making it come true. Harold began to play, and Carnegie Hall fell silent. His fingers moved across the guitar strings. His voice rose into the rafters. And for the next 90 minutes, a 71-year-old former janitor reminded the world what authentic, hard-earned, soul-deep music sounds like. When the final note faded, the audience rose as one. The standing ovation lasted 12 minutes. People were crying, cheering, holding up their phones to capture the moment. Tyler Bennett stood in the front row, applauding harder than anyone, thinking about how a joke that started with cruelty had ended with grace, thinking about how the man he tried to mock had taught him more about dignity, forgiveness, and resilience than anyone in his life. Backstage after the show, a reporter asked Harold what he wanted people to remember about his story. Harold thought for a long moment, then smiled. "I want them to remember that being seen isn't the same thing as being visible. You can be visible every single day. To your family, your friends, the person you pass on the street, and still not be truly seen. But when someone finally sees you, really sees you, it changes everything." Tyler's video went viral because people saw something real. They saw pain and beauty and survival, all wrapped up in one song. They saw a human being. And that's all any of us really want. To be seen as fully, messily, wonderfully human. He paused, his eyes distant. "Sarah used to tell me that our dreams are like seeds. Sometimes they grow right away. Sometimes they stay buried for decades. But if the seed is good, if it's real, it's just waiting for the right conditions to break through the soil." She was right. She was always right. As Harold left Carnegie Hall that night, he passed by the janitorial staff cleaning the venue. He stopped and shook each of their hands, looked them in the eyes, asked their names. Because Harold Mitchell knew something that most people never learn. Every person you pass has a song inside them. Every face you don't notice has a story. Every invisible soul has a dream they've either buried or are desperately trying to keep alive. And sometimes all it takes is one person to really listen, one moment of being truly seen, 1 second chance to remind you that your life, your voice, your story, it all matters. It always mattered. You just needed the world to finally hear it. Harold Mitchell was 70 years old when he became invisible. He was 71 when the world finally saw him. And he spent every day after that making sure that everyone he met knew they were seen too. Because once you've lived in the shadows and stepped into the light, you never forget what that transformation feels like. And you never stop wanting to share that feeling with every invisible person still waiting for their moment to sing.